to ask. Third, in my capacity as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, effective immediately, I hereby direct all American military units and law enforcement agencies in the Pacific Northwest to halt operations and observe a full ceasefire. President Chelsea Clinton, the air conditioner was on again in the upper room of Mrs. Sweetzer's shambling boarding house, and this time it was needed. This July was turning out to be a genuinely hot month in Seattle, in every sense of the word. The men who were meeting there today were the Political Bureau's working committee in charge of assembling and briefing the rebel delegation to the Longview conference. The living room of the small, cheap-furnished apartment was crowded, with several of the participants seated on the Formica kitchen table which had been moved in. In addition to Frank Barrow, Jeff Anderson, Pat Brennan, Red Morehouse, Joe Dortmunder, and Corby Morgan, there was Colonel Carter Wingfield from the newly formed Special Service, Colonel Daniel Dangerous Dan McGrew, who had taken over the 3rd Section from the late Matt Redmond, as well as Fred Schuster and Andrei Stavrovich Stepanov of the Political Bureau itself. "Okay, comrades, first order of business," said Jeff Anderson. "We've gotten a list of who the ZOG delegation to the conference will be. I have to admit, they've put together a high-powered team. The chair of the American delegates will be Walter Stanhope, the Secretary of State, just like we'd heard. Sitting at his right hand and looking over his shoulder will be the Secretary of Homeland Security, Howard Weintraub, who will presumably be there as the official Jewish evil eminence." "So we decided to allow Jews at the conference table?" asked Barrow. "I heard there was some debate about that in the Army Council." "True," said Stepanov. His English was excellent and only slightly accented. "The Army Council was against it, basically on the moral grounds that we need to be shooting Jews, not talking to them. The Political Bureau felt having someone like Weintraub at the talks might actually speed things up. There is no point in conducting a conference with the Jewish issue hanging over everything like a fog. Best to bring it right down onto the table. The enemy has stated that they want Weintraub there, and we have decided not to oppose it. It would only cause further delays." "I doubt they would have allowed this to be a Goyim-only affair," said Brennan. "You know the Hebes. They can't abide the idea that the Gentiles are talking about them behind their backs. Only conference to discuss an Aryan-only future for at least one segment of our race. It would be a historic achievement, a turning point." I could see their reasoning, but was it really practical? Even as attenuated as the Jewish world power is compared to, say, 50 years ago, it's still very much a reality, and it's inherently intertwined with the real-world capitalist power structure. The Jews and the corporate bigwigs in the smoke-filled boardrooms who actually run this god-awful clusterfuck of a society are going to have to sign off on any deal we make anyway, so it's not as if there's any way we could keep them out of the process. It's time the funny little man came out from behind the curtain, and we all get a good look at Oz the Great and Powerful. In a way, this will in fact be something of a historic occasion in more ways than one, the first diplomatic and political assembly brought together to resolve a specific issue wherein the Jews are acknowledged as a power in their own right, and to which they have sent their own representative. I'm surprised any Jew would even agree to sit at the same table with us, after they've spent the past 100 years demonizing and dehumanizing anyone and everything even mildly to the right of center, said Barrow. Until the neoconservatives came along, and they decided that a bogus right-wing ideology better served their needs, pointed out Stepanov. We naturally tend to think of Jews in our own terms as left-wing and liberal or as neoconservative rightists, but in fact they have no worldview at all other than their own survival and domination, which is the basis of their entire religion. There is an old rabbinical saying that the first question to be asked about everything is it good for the Jews? Any reason to sit down with us before, said Morgan. We weren't shooting him. Thar's something about a gun pointed that Kinder gets his attention. Oh, Mr. Weintraub will definitely be a spoiler, said Anderson. He's the neocon's neocon. His public comments and speeches make old Jug-Ears himself look sane and moderate by comparison. The red, white, and blue must wave over every Middle Eastern oil field in the name of democracy and civilization. We must be ready at the drop of a hat to slaughter 1 million Muslims or 1 million white people in Idaho if it's necessary to save one Jewish life. in Tel Aviv, and he's made clear in the relatively short time he's been in office that he doesn't mind getting his hands bloody. We know that as deputy director of DHS, he was personally involved in that horror they inflicted on Kathy Frost. Then he belongs on third section's to-do list, not at a goddamned conference table, snapped Morgan angrily. If the talks break bad, I'll let you kill him, John. Who else? Asked Barrow. Anderson looked at his notes. The American military will be represented by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Air Force Major General Charles Brubaker, also known as Bomber Brubaker. His military strategic and tactical sense consists of dropping as much explosives as possible on as many people as possible to make sure you get the right ones. Brubaker has impeccable neocon credentials, of course. He personally ordered the carpet bombing raids on Mecca and Medina, thus outraging every Muslim in the world and leading to the 1,000 generations of jihad fatwa from the assembled Muslim imams of the world. He also authorized and defended the gang rape of Muslim women in American interrogation facilities to soften up male relatives believed to have information. They wanted to send Willis Peasley as well, the director of FATPO, who is a retired Army general, but we did put our foot down with regards to niggers. This conference is strictly seg, human beings only. And they went for that? Asked Barrow. The official story is now that Peasley himself refused to come because he won't negotiate with racist terrorists, and he is supposed to be on the verge of resigning. Interesting, if true, commented Morehouse. It may indicate fissures in the government over the negotiations and what direction they should take, but it also may be a convenient fiction to get around the stumbling block of our refusal to negotiate with Monkoids at Longview. There are no other known blacks or major Hispanic players in their proposed delegation, and that's also an interesting development. When it comes to the crunch and serious American interests are involved, decolored folk seem to have been relegated to the back of the bus again. Stanhope and Vice President Fairfax will be taking a lot of flack from the NAACP and Black Congressional Caucus for not having any nappy heads at the table. They're apparently willing to take that heat rather than delay the proceedings, which I find fascinating. In essence, what they're doing here is throwing 100 years of so-called equality out the window and tacitly admitting it was hogwash all along. I'm still astounded they are willing to do that. What the hell are they up to? Muttered Anderson, his brow furrowed. Who else? Asked Barrow. Will be additionally honored with the presence of Senator Jeanette Galinsky from California, another Jew, said Anderson. Presumed official feminist delegate. Are we going to be talking about feminism? Asked Barrow, his eyebrows raised. Why, for God's sake? What the hell does that have to do with ending the war? God knows, said Anderson with a shrug. My guess is that Galinsky is there as a sop to the PC and pervert left. Maybe she's going to try to delay and confuse things by demanding that we don't force women in the Northwest Republic to wear veils. Made to put on a veil before she comes to the table. God damn, somebody whomp that woman with the ugly stick. It is more likely that she will be there as the personal representative of Hillary Clinton, said Stepanov. She and Mrs. Clinton are very close, politically and personally. I think she holds the Wicked Witch's watching brief on the proceedings, and will be reporting to her personally, agreed Morehouse. Carpet munchers, said McGrew laconically. They are reputed to have had a lesbian relationship in the past, yes, said Morehouse fastidiously. They seem to be more political allies now than anything else. It will be interesting to see just what contribution Senator Galinsky does make. She will speak with her mistress's voice, so we need to listen. Remember, Hillary still runs the country, or runs the presidency anyway, through her daughter. Hillary herself isn't coming? Asked Barrow. No, said Anderson. Of course her health is bad and she's getting a little long in the tooth. Living proof die young, I suppose. But her absence from the conference is another one of those portents that leaves itself open to. One thing, said McGrew. 3Sec has some people on Capitol Hill, of course, and we've gotten some intercepts, emails and memos between Hillary Clinton, the Galinsky woman, and Howard Weintraub, as well as some others in what appears to be a tight little lefty Jew clique within the government. Those three especially have been getting quite chummy over the past few months. In these memos and emails they're speaking Yiddish, and they've been overheard speaking Yiddish in conversations in the Capitol cafeteria, in the corridors, etc. Apparently the Wicked Witch of the West is quite fluent. They're using it as a kind of code between themselves. They've even made a running joke about it with the other members of Congress, their staff and government bureaucrats. They call themselves the Shtick Talkers, which is a takeoff on the Wind Talkers, those Navajo Indian radio operators the Marines used in the South Pacific during World War II. They claim none of us evil Nazi-type dudes would ever be able to listen in on them. What I can foresee happening is that during the conference all kinds of enemy jaw-jacking is going to be going on behind our backs in a language which isn't exactly an Aryan forte. Right now 3SEC has access to volunteers or assets who speak over 60 languages, including Asian and African languages if necessary, since we have veterans who are in Indonesia or the Philippines or Somalia, but no actual Yiddish speakers for obvious reasons. We do, however, have a number of Germans, including Comrade Schuster here, who can at least make a stab at deciphering it. We need to stick a couple of our real Jerry Rebs in with you guys. General Barrow. God, I'd rather face a fat-po SWAT team, said Schuster in disgust. Yiddish is based on a very degenerate form of medieval Low German, true, but it's full of Polish and Russian and Hebrew words as well as its own slang. They have thrown away any kind of proper grammar or syntax, so it's just mush. Plus there are a number of Yiddish dialects depending on what godforsaken shtetl in Russia or Poland the individual Jews' ancestors came from, all of it filtered through 100 years on the Lower East Side. I understand there's now even an officially recognized Hollywood dialect. To an educated German speaker it reads like the writing of an illiterate moron, and it sounds like the babbling of a drunken baby. I'll be willing to go and take a stab at it, but we need you to take over as political officer for the German division we will be forming when we make the jump to NDF, Fred, said Brennan. We've got our first 300 men earmarked, and we'll be getting them together in a couple of weeks, probably in the Medford district. We've even gotten hold of some old-style Stahlhelm helmets for them. Frank, we've got a Yiddish speaker in 3 brigades, spoke up Dortmunder. We do? Asked Barrow in surprise. Who? It takes a village, replied Dortmunder. Some Kike lawyer was high bidder on the kid when he was 8. Ah, jays, the poor bastard, hissed Brennan. We checked him out when he first came in, and he's legit, Dortmunder. He's from here originally. They sent his father to Walla Walla and made off with his sister to God knows where. When he finally hit the road, he tried to slaughter his Yiddish Papa Kosher style with a butcher knife. There's a hate crime and attempted murder warrant out on him down in California. He was one of Father Andy's kids. Brennan kissed his right thumb and crossed himself. I knew Father Andy. May his soul rest in peace. If this lad passed muster with Andrew, then sure he's true blue. He says he does. We'll need him in the delegation, decided McGrew. We'll make him an aide-de-camp or something so he hangs around in the background listening. There's a problem with that, said Dortmunder. He's under right now. I sent him and your lady, the lovely Nightshade, into that Assembly of God church over in Bellevue to latch onto that paratroop Captain Regenthal and see what he's up to. I understand that's a priority. It is, said McGrew. We need to watch our backs and make sure we don't end up getting caught with our pants down by some tub-thumping vigilante force who think they've got to kill a Nazi for Christ. Have they come up with anything? Dortmunder shook his head. Not yet, but they've only been in there a week or so. They need time. Okay, that's a minor detail, decided Barrow. Don't shut him down yet. We'll wait and see how this shapes up, and if we still think it's a good idea, we can extract him just before we go to Longview. And I want Nightshade back ASAP, said McGrew. I have something else I need to get her onto. Let's say another month on this church gig, then we'll have to go at it from another angle. Stepanov spoke. Brubaker, Weintraub, and Stanhope will form a kind of troika, as we used to say back in the old country, but they will of course be accompanied by their own entourage of experts, aides, flunkies, spin doctors, and general nomenclatura flotsam. Does anyone spot the one interesting aspect of that team? Asked Morehouse. Every one of those men holds a position in the United States government where the Northwest Volunteer Army has assassinated his immediate predecessor in office. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they finally agreed to negotiate, said Barrow. Apple Smash and Pigkill made the point good and proper. These bastards in the United States power structure are starting to understand that they personally are no longer immune from facing the consequences of their actions. It's one thing to cut 10,000 white jobs and hire 10,000 Mexicans, or order some defenseless little country bombed into rubble by cowards who hide in the sky, or pass a law that pays for murdering 1 million babies with tax dollars, when you can let yourself off with a bit of genteel brooding by the fire in the study over a snifter of brandy and a good cigar. It's another thing to commit acts of tyranny when you understand that tomorrow morning you may step out your front door and a bullet will splatter your brains all over the wall. Why do you think there's such a shortage of FBI agents these days? So short that they had to bring in special thugs from FATPO. The FBI never minded getting a little blood all over their Gucci shoes until it was their blood. Then all of a sudden, most of their agents seem to have discovered an urgent need for a career change. I think we've always underestimated just what personal physical cowards the people who run the United States are. America gave them this wonderful, luxurious good life in exchange for their moral blindness and their collusion in the insane imperial dreams of the neocons. These people enjoy the hell out of that good life. They've gotten soft as butter, and they have no intention whatsoever of sacrificing their own lives so that they can't enjoy all those American goodies anymore. The problem with the old movement always boiled down to the fact that the white man was a coward too. As bad as things were for us, life was just too sweet. We had our color televisions and our air conditioners and our refrigerators full of beer, and so for generations we refused to do the only thing we knew would actually change things and give our children a better world. Now we have found our courage. Our hearts are whole again, while those of our enemies are hollow and empty, and now we have finally forced them to the table. Now tell me you ain't a politician, said Wingfield with a laugh. You can make an off-the-cuff speech like that and you still think you're not up for these negotiations? Said Morgan, I'm looking forward to hearing you speechify at those sons of bitches all day long. What does our negotiating position look like going in? Barrow wanted to know. Do we have any idea yet what they're going to be throwing at me? Anderson nodded. We do have a few sources, so yes, we're starting to get a vague outline. We're running into several problems, primary among them being prisoner release. They're starting to get hinky on that. As you know, back when they first approached us last month, we kicked off this whole episode by demanding good faith prisoner releases, starting with the old man. They turned us down flat on him, which was hardly unexpected, and we have been told from Florence that he understands and he's willing to wait. He honestly doesn't care what happens to him so long as we can secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. The feds have so far released about 300 volunteers and other white political prisoners, but they are balking at giving us not just the old man back, but a number of other key prisoners and some of the more sensitive individuals like Kathy Frost. I'm amazed they let Kathy live at all, said Barrow. You would think they would have made her disappear long ago. Morehouse nodded. I'm surprised as well. She does have a case pending before the UN and the World Court in The Hague, and it finally looks like the international legal community has screwed up the guts to take on the United States on the issue of torture. At least the torture of good-looking white women, as opposed to dark-skinned Muslims, whom the Americans have tortured all they wanted to since the days of Abu Ghraib. Plus our girls at the women's detention block were able to smuggle those horrible pictures out of Pullman and get them to the European media. She's become something of a celebrity, and I guess they figure it would be a little embarrassing if she vanished or ended up dead in her cell. We need to get her out of their hands, said Barrow decisively. Truce or not, she's always going to be in danger as long as they've got her. She's too potentially embarrassing. That's going to be the first demand I lay on 'em. If can get her away from those animals and nothing else, I'll consider this conference a success. What they've done is they've worked out a series of incremental releases of our people by list, with some curves they keep throwing us like deportation of officers or so-called key terrorists to foreign countries, etc., so they don't come back home and rejoin the NVA, said Morehouse. It's supposed to be what they refer to as performance-based, which means that once the ceasefire goes into effect, the longer we go without killing anybody, the more prisoners they release. We give in on their demand A, they release prisoner list A, we give them demand B, they release prisoner list B, you get the idea. The old man is supposed to be the ultimate prize, the last one released once an agreement is signed. They apparently want to keep him completely the hell out of the whole negotiating process, while we of course will need to demand immediate and unmonitored access, telephone conferencing with him, etc. So that's something else you can look forward to a lot of haggling on. Okay, but I don't want to get the conference bogged down into a big argument over nitpicking details on prisoner release, said Barrow. Or nitpicking details over anything. That's one way the Americans will try to draw the business out forever, beating one topic to death for weeks and months, and then on to another one. We need to keep our eyes on the prize here and not let them drag us off into 101 endless digressions. We are there for one reason and one reason only, to get the United States government the hell out of our country. Let's get that done, and the details will resolve themselves. I hear the sound of some realpolitik, said Schuster with a smile. That is good. I told you you'd get the hang of this quick, Frank, said Morehouse with a chuckle. Yes, that's what they'll do. Delay, delay, delay. And while they're delaying, we'll be moving on the ground, said Wingfield. That's why the SS has been formed. We will be forming action groups and identifying key targets throughout the homeland. Facilities we need, factories, warehouses of supplies we need, banks, medical facilities, administrative and political centers, you name it. We will be taking advantage of the truce to come out in the open and take over, take out, or help ourselves as need be. While you're down in Longview talking, the party will be acting. A lot of your job, General, will be to explain away and smooth over some of the actions we'll be carrying out. We'll try to keep the shooting to a minimum, but we have no intention of simply sitting on our thumbs while you guys bat the breeze. As far as the Army Council is concerned, the establishment of the Northwest Republic begins right now. How long do you want the negotiations to last? Asked Barrow. Between 1 month and 2, said Morehouse. Frankly, there will be so many truce violations that it will be difficult for either side to keep up the pretense of civility too much longer than that. Now, there's an old diplomatic trick to moving forward negotiations when one or both sides really wants a resolution and you're not just talking to hear your heads roar. You appoint 2 or 3 serious subcommittees with members from both sides, working groups to resolve specific issues with the understanding that the main conference will back whatever those working groups decide. You'll notice I said 2 or 3 subcommittees, not 10 or 20. You pick the stickiest, most serious and legitimate side issues, things like prisoner release and borders that really do have to be resolved, and you delegate authority to people in your team to get their heads together with appointees from the other side and solve them, but you yourself don't get involved. You and your main colleagues keep those 5 across the table pinned to their seats, and while your teammates are thrashing out the details in the subcommittees, you keep the pressure on for the main points. And those are? Queried Barrow. 3, said Anderson. Well, 2, if you want to consider prisoner release a subcommittee issue. First and most important, we want the complete withdrawal of all American armed forces and administrative personnel from territory designated for the future Northwest Republic, with a few exceptions we'll list for you, people like postal workers and forest rangers, and people we will need to run the new country. Secondly, we want the formal cession of authority and recognition of our independence, with a timetable for all of the above. Pin them down on that. None of this performance-based shit on the main point of withdrawal. The treaty we want will consist of a piece of paper which recognizes the Northwest American Republic as an independent nation and sets a firm date measurable in weeks, not months, for the removal of every American hand with a gun in it. That's all we want from them. All their gun-toters gone and their recognition of the homeland as real live country. They are going to move heaven and earth to get you off track. You mustn't let them. Northwest American Republic? Questioned McGrew. Why not Northwest Aryan Republic? Because then for years to come we'd have to stop and explain to people what we mean by Aryan, which will be hard since we seem to be somewhat unsure of that ourselves, said Morehouse with a sigh. One thing we learned early on, back when we were building the party before the war broke out, is to keep everything as simple as possible. We want a name for our country that states who we are without having to go off into a long digression into 19th century racial theory. However, Dan, if you object, you and anyone else will have a chance to say so and put it to a vote. Immediately after the American withdrawal, we will convene some kind of parliament or constituent assembly, and all of these things will eventually be ratified either by that assembly or in a nationwide plebiscite. Nothing is written in stone. But right now we don't worry about that. We take it one step at a time, and the purpose of this step is to get Zog the hell out of here. Okay, now let's get into the nub of it, said Barrow. Where do we draw the line, literally? What territory are we asking for? It's like that used car deal we mentioned at the picnic. We start with a talk-down position, said Morehouse. We ask for more than we expect to get, listen to their screams of outrage, and over time we reluctantly let them talk us down to what we really will accept, kicking and scratching all the way. We start out by asking for the entire states of Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Montana, Wyoming, and all of California north of Highway 299, say from Redding on north. I'd love to bring Mount Shasta into our country. In other words, roughly the part of the country where there has been at least some NVA activity. There has also been armed resistance as well as certain parts of Alberta and British Columbia. I know that's what we'll claim, but they're not going to give us all that, Barrow told them flatly. It's our talk-down position. We let ourselves be whittled. Whittled down to what? Pressed Barrow. What exactly is the bare minimum we'll settle for? What we will eventually accept is the 3 core homeland states of Washington, Idaho, and Oregon, along with a good chunk of western Montana. This is where the majority of the NVA units have fought the revolution, but nothing less, Frank warned Brennan. Any bits and pieces of Wyoming and California you can wrench away from them will be great, but we get those 3 states plus Montana from Missoula on west, or we go back to war. What about Alaska and Western Canada? Barrow demanded. Red Morehouse sighed. Alaska is a problem, and Canada more so, he said. Realpolitik is often a very ugly thing, General Barrow, commented Schuster. You're telling me that we're going to stab our Canadian comrades in the back? Snapped Barrow in some disgust. It's not that simple, Frank, replied Morehouse quietly. You know that ever since the first days of the Northwest migration movement, we've always wanted to take at least parts of British Columbia and Alberta with us into the Republic. BC especially. That part of our land is simply too beautiful to leave to the wogs. But the Canadian situation has always been eccentric, at times running parallel with what's been going on in the United States, but often developing a life of its own. Canadian politics and Canadian demographics and Canadian conditions are different from ours. The Canadian security forces were never as numerous and as powerful as the American ones, and Canada is a mighty big place, with the result that we have even been able to establish some secure cross-border field hospitals and refuge facilities in BC, in addition to which we have small, but very brave and very effective active service units in Vancouver and Victoria and some other places up there, who have actually been able to reduce the Chinese and Indian subcontinental population of that area by several million and bring down rents and property values to the point where white people can actually live there again. They're some of our best. So, what's the problem? Stepanov took it up. There won't be any Canadian delegation at Longview. The Canadian government absolutely refuses to participate in any peace talks or to discuss any possibility of independence for Western Canada. They always did, even back in the late 20th century when Western Canada had its own non-racial independence movement. You would think that since the Northwest American Republic is going to be on their borders, that the Ottawa regime would at least want to be involved in these negotiations. But they won't even send an observer. We have asked both through the Irish intermediaries and the Americans as well, and we have been repeatedly told by both the American government and also by the international arbitrators that the Canadian government refuses to have anything to do with any of this. There will be no Canadian representative at the peace talks, and Canada will not honor any provisions of whatever agreement we reach as it affects their territory. They haven't been hit anywhere near as hard as the Americans, said Wingfield. Maybe we should have been blowing things up and killing politicians and media people in Ottawa and Toronto, as well as in New York and Washington, D.C. That's hardly surprising, said Barrow. Historically, the Canadian government has always been the most pro-Zionist of Israel itself. Their hate crime laws were always the worst, worse even than Britain and Germany in some ways. The Old man's books were banned there as early as the 1990s, and they had laws against even private possession of white dissident literature 20 years before the United States brought them in. Those suck-ass Shabazz Goyim in Ottawa even used to issue Canadian passports to Mossad agents as a matter of routine. Plus, there is a significant element of Jews and American liberals up there who couldn't wear jug ears, and the neocons fled to Canada after the 2004 elections, and by now they constitute a kind of intelligentsia for the Canadian ruling elite, who were never exactly brilliant, put in Schuster. I suspect this may be that philo-Semitic liberal ruling elite's way of cocking a snook at their hapless neocon cousins south of the border who have been so badly shredded by the rebellion that they now have to undergo the humiliation of negotiating with us evil fascists. Morehouse nodded. Yes, but this isn't just theoretical. This is going to be a real problem. We have a number of very fine Canadian comrades who have given their lives for the Republic, and who are going to be angry and devastated if we don't bring at least parts of British Columbia and Alberta into our new homeland. They will feel terribly betrayed by the NVA, and they will have reason to be. But they have to understand that we are trying to create a legal and recognized new sovereign nation here, and for that to happen, the Canadian government has to recognize us. We can't just strike a deal with the United States and then say, oh, by the by, we're grabbing 10 square miles of Canada as well. Suppose our Canadian comrades decide that two can play the game of not recognizing the Longview result, and they refuse to lay down their arms when we tell them to, demanded Dortmunder. I wouldn't blame them if they did. Is the new government of the Republic going to back them up if they decide to keep on fighting, or pull the rug out from under them so we can get our own piece of the pie? Morehouse spread his hands helplessly. Gentlemen, what can I tell you? This is one of those volatile variables that you must deal with at the conference and later on the government of the Republic will have to deal with, and I just plain can't predict what approach we'll take. I agree it stinks to high heaven, but we can't afford to throw away this chance to create a homeland for all our people, including those Canadians who can accept the verdict and move down here. We will be asking white people from all across the world to come here, after all. That's about the best I can give you now. Maybe we can somehow figure out some way to force the Canadians to the table. But we must keep our eyes on the prize and take it if we can. I'll tell you what we can do, said Barrow. You make sure we go in there with a list of every Canadian racial and political prisoner, NVA or otherwise, being held by Ottawa, and we make it just plain goddamn non-negotiable that Canadian prisoners are to be released and handed over to the Republic, and if the Canucks don't want to send anyone, then we will turn the screws on the American delegation to make it happen. No differentiation between Canadian and American POWs. That much at least we can do. Damn it, Red, if we're going to stab our own people up north in the back, then we need to at least do that much for them. Not leave them sitting in those hellholes like Kingston. Agreed, said Morehouse. And I see no need absolutely to give up hope. You will know that the Army Council and the Political Bureau have already decided it simply isn't viable to demand that the Canadians be dragged in and forced to part with territory. It could bring the whole deal to a halt, but the American delegation won't know that. So we need for you to emphasize Canada as much as possible, even though in the final analysis we will allow ourselves to be talked out of it, if that's the only way to establish the Republic. Another damned face-saver for Zog, at the expense of thousands of white Canadian NVA comrades and millions of white Canadians? Demanded Barrow angrily. I don't like it any more than you do, Frank, but it has to be this way, said Morehouse. Trying to force Canada into the pot is simply too risky. It could be a deal breaker. The same thing with Alaska. Most of our Alaskan comrades ended up coming down here to fight with active service units in the main homeland states. There simply hasn't been that much NVA activity in Alaska, and there wasn't all that much party activity before 10/22 either. What there was up there got mixed in with that kosher conservative Alaska Independence Party crap. We just don't have a strong enough base in the population to demand that Alaska be included in the Republic. That's just the way it's worked out, and the chance that the United States government is going to give us the largest remaining oil reserves in North America is non-existent. My own view is to go ahead and concede Alaska at the first opportunity. They'll appreciate your not wasting everybody's time. Maybe you can work some kind of trade-off, We won't mention Alaska in return for the release of Canadian prisoners, something of that nature. Realpolitik, said Schuster again. Realpolitik sucks, grunted Barrow. It does indeed, said Morehouse. Welcome to the majors, rookies. A few afternoons after the holiday, Mitch Newman had scheduled dress rehearsals for the 3 one-act plays that the Hillside High Drama class was to perform on Friday night. Before we rehearse the plays themselves, I want to go over the costumes for each presentation, he announced. That left Cody up in the catwalks above the auditorium with nothing much to do for a while, as Mitch and his assistant director Suzanne examined and made suggestions on each character's outfit, among the first being Emily in her platypus getup, which Cody had to say looked frankly ridiculous. A few minutes later, Cody saw her at the end of the catwalk, wearing shorts and a t-shirt and minus the duckbill rig, beckoning to him. He went over to her. "Come on," she said excitedly. "I've got those hacking programs from Doc Doom. This costume mess will keep Mitch busy for at least 20 minutes. More if he can find some excuse to lay his hands on Kelly. His office will be unlocked, and we can crack into his computer." Cody followed her out into an upstairs corridor, down the back stairs and into the lower floor where the staff offices were, and within a minute they were inside Mitch Newman's cinder-block cubbyhole. The lights were off, and the teacher's computer with the plasma screen glowed on his desk. "What if somebody walks in on us?" asked Cody. "You're supposed to be my boyfriend, right?" "So we came in here to snog," she said. "Here, you sit down at the desk, and if I suddenly fall down into your lap and jam my tongue down your throat, you'll know the door's opening behind you." "Yeah, well, if that happens, don't get pissed off if I stick my hand under your bra," said Cody. "Have to make it realistic, you know. Why would I wear a bra?" she asked. "Nothing to put in one. Okay, we have to get to the hate crime hotline website first, which means we have to log on," said Cody. He jiggled the mouse. "Okay, I've got the login screen." Emily opened the computer's CD drive tray and inserted an unmarked disk which she took from her shoulder bag. "Now how does this work?" Suddenly the screen changed color and little creatures appeared, dancing and doing handsprings around the school system's login screen. "What the hell are those? Leprechauns?" demanded Cody. "I think they're supposed to be gremlins," said Emily. "Look, I'm glad D&D is on our side, but I think he flew away on his own broom a long time ago. Okay, this first disk is a password cracker. This is a school system computer, so we know that the username will be an hyperlink melto:"Newman at kingschools.edu. Ken Newman at kingschools.edu. Cody typed it in. That's standard for all school system employee computers. It's the password that's the problem. We start with the vowels. We'll have to do each letter twice, because the school's passwords are case-sensitive. In the password field, type the letter A, all caps. Cody did so. A gremlin ran out onto the login screen, dropped its tiny pink trousers and mooned him, but nothing else happened. Okay, no capital S. Now type in a small He did so. There suddenly appeared 11 blanks in the password field. Of these, the 9th and the last blank were filled in with the letter small a. Okay, now a small e, she directed him. That also brought up 2 letters, so now they had chink, a. Small I, said Emily. This time the gremlin moon came with a fart. Get it, said Cody, typing in O and U, which produced 2 obscene acts by the dancing gremlins. Now the consonants, she said. I'll watch the door. I'm snog ready, Cody assured her. He didn't get a hit until H. Wait a minute, I think I know what it is. He typed in a Y, an R, and then completed the password. The school's website came up. That's it. It's Yetzer Chara, said Cody with a grim nod. Yes or what? What the hell is that, and how did you know what it was? Asked Emily in surprise. The broadening advantages of a yeshiva education, replied Cody. Yetzer Hara, it's Hebrew. It means the evil impulse in man that motivates him to sin, which is ironically appropriate in this situation, don't you think? Our Mr. Newman is a Jew, all right, and that scratching sound you hear coming from the cosmos is the sound of his death warrant being signed. Would a Hebrew password be enough for the lieutenant, do you think? Now we're in, let's finish the job, she said. Besides, I want to know what the inside of that hate crime website looks like. We might find other information in there that 3sec can use. Go to an hyperlink. www.stopthehate.gov. Cody did so. The website came up, a streaming American flag in the background over a moving banner proclaiming update. Millions of dollars in new rewards for domestic terrorists. Bounties have never been higher. Serve your country and assure your financial future today. Confidentiality guaranteed. Cody clicked on the Member Services button and a login screen came up. Okay, now what? He asked. The password cracker again? We don't have a username, though. No, this one is a little more complicated, said Nightshade, removing the first CD and inserting a second into the drive. The little dancing gremlins vanished. I'm not 100% on the technology like I told you before, but what it does is it impersonates an admin logon, identifies the static IP of this computer, pings the website, discovers its universal resource locator address, and if there have been any previous logins from this IP address to that URL, it replicates the last login. If this computer has never before been used to log into this site, then it will tell us. That still doesn't mean that Newman... A username Macho Man suddenly appeared on the screen, as well as a password. Houston, we have a rat, said Cody. Affirmative, Godel Hador. It means a mighty avenger of the Jewish people like the holy Rabbi Loeb of Prague, who created the Yoseleh the Golem, a monster zombie of clay, and used it to kill all the Gentiles the rabbi didn't like. Hit enter, said Emily. He did. A screen flashed up that said, Welcome, Macho Man, and thank you for defending America's freedom. She studied it. Hey, he's got files on individual people. Looks like our teach has been a busy little rodent. Christ, looks like he's turned in almost 50 people in the past few years. That's a nice chunk of change. I wonder how many of them were actually guilty of anything beyond telling a nigger joke. Or even guilty of that. Yes, she said bitterly. There he is. Ricky Jenkins. I knew him since the 5th grade. He came up to me on the playground and gave his apple from his lunch. All very cute and adorable in an after-school channel kind of way. What happened? Is he in Walla Walla or Auburn? Asked Cody. He never made it past his first night in King County Jail, said Emily bleakly. The multicultural shower scene. I'm sorry, comrade. Thanks. Well, on the upside, Newman doesn't seem to have interested himself in either of us. I don't see our names. I guess he isn't as good at spotting evil Nazi racists as he thinks he is. Don't take time to read it all now. Just bring up some files and run a print on them. Urged. Emily. We got what we came for. Now we need to get the hell out of Dodge. Then print out his money page so we can prove he's been paid for his informing. There won't be any problems with getting the CO's go-ahead. Especially since now we know his username and password, and we can access his account from any properly shielded computer and let him take a good long look at his leisure. Hey, there's a familiar name. She pointed to a file and Cody's heart almost froze in horror. The file said Kelly Shipman. I'm going to kill him, Cody choked out as he opened the file and hit print. Whether or not Bells gives the okay. I'm going to kill him. The two of them made it back into the auditorium and up onto the catwalk without anyone noticing their absence, and Cody handled the lights and special effects for the dress rehearsals of the 3 one-act plays, including Emily's dance of the duckbill with soliloquy, for which she once again donned her ridiculous costume. Cody even earned a passing congratulatory comment on his skills from Mitch Newman at the wrap-up. As soon as he could, Cody gave Farmer Brown a call on one of his cell phones. Hey, Dad, he said, I think. Me and that funny houseplant you know about need a visit to Uncle Bob. We got something to show him. Yeah, well, both of you need come straight home after school, said Farmer Brown. Uncle Bob and some of his friends have another chore for you. Another rock and roll lullaby? Asked Cody eagerly. No, said Brown. You're both about to begin your modeling career. Huh? When you get here. Okay, said Cody. He told Emily, come on, we're about to begin our modeling careers. Our what? She asked. Don't ask. Why not? Because I don't know, said Cody. The two of them left the auditorium and headed for the parking lot in the press of the other kids. In one of life's tragic ironies, Cody Brock was so intent on what he was going to say to his commanding officer to convince Bells to let them take care of the Mitch Newman situation, that he missed the very thing he so feared. He didn't notice it when Mitch called out as the kids were leaving, "Kelly, once you get changed, could you stop by my office for a few minutes? There's something I want to talk to you about." "Sure, Mitch," Kelly called back. She thought to herself. Here it comes, I bet. Kelly wasn't stupid. She knew that this summer school was the last chance Newman would have to take a crack at her, and she had resigned herself to receiving and deflecting at least one serious pass from her teacher before the summer school ended. Why not, after all? Over the past 4 years, most of her other male teachers and several of the female ones as well had tried, although Kelly had duly and unobtrusively taken note of the fact that almost all of the minority and lesbian teachers who had been at Hillside when she entered it in 9th grade were gone by the time she graduated, something that she correctly attributed to their fear of the NVA. Routine sexual harassment was nothing new for her. Newman had made it clear he was attracted to her, including his hands-on instruction during South Pacific, but so far it hadn't reached the stage of anything really annoying. If it came down, she'd just have to handle it. Not the first time, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. "What did you want to see me about, Mitch?" asked Kelly, sweeping into the room a few minutes later. Today she was wearing a pale cream silk sleeveless blouse, a brown leather skirt and sandals that drove Newman bonkers, since he had a definite fetish for dainty white female feet. Newman was sitting at his desk, his computer on, and he was printing a file off of the hate crime hotline website. In fact, it was the very same file that Cody and Emily had surreptitiously printed a couple of hours before. Kelly's file. "Kelly," said Newman gravely, "are you aware that some of the remarks you have made in class and around school have not only crossed the line into unacceptable and overt racism, but in some cases might be construed as being sympathetic to hate crime and domestic terrorism?" "Huh?" asked Kelly, caught off guard and for a moment not comprehending. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're a filthy little Nazi bitch," said Newman calmly. "What?" cried Kelly, suddenly feeling the walls falling in on her. Newman handed her the file from the hate crime hotline. She saw that he had noted down 12 separate incidents, with dates and meticulous documentation. These included inappropriate humor, social exclusion of minorities. There hadn't been room enough for Cindy Nakamura at the Cool Girls table one day in the cafeteria, and several alleged statements on her part, sympathetic to the goals and activities of the Northwest Volunteer Army. Some of the charges were more or less correct, albeit taken completely out of context. Others of them Mitch had simply made up out of whole cloth. She was so stunned she didn't realize until it was too late that Mitch had slipped behind her and locked the office door. She looked up at him. "This is all lies and you know it," she shouted. "No one will believe you. How many sluts down through the ages have uttered those words, I wonder?" said Newman, his eyes beginning to roll and twitch. "In today's world, I think you will be amazed what federal law enforcement will believe. The fact is, Kelly, that I have in the past made myself sufficiently useful to our government in fighting racism and domestic terrorism that I can pretty much do whatever the hell I want. So I made a few casual comments about things on TV." "So what?" cried the girl in increasing desperation. "This is supposed to be a free country, isn't it?" "You can tell it to the judge," sneered Newman. "Quite literally, before she sends you to Nevada to get your brain cleansed of all your Nazi filth. No contract at the studio for you if that happens, little girl. You'll end up 50 years old and working in the checkout line at Safeway, if you're lucky. Or maybe not. It doesn't have to happen, Kelly. That file can stay locked in my hard drive. You know what I want, and I don't want much. Just a little light summer's dalliance. You give it up, now and any other time I want it between now and the end of the course, that file disappears. And you go on to stardom. You stick your little nose in the air and look down at me, and I move that mouse up an inch, I hit send, and that sound you will hear will be the lovely and talented Kelly Shipman being flushed down the toilet of life. You let me out of here now, she shouted at him. "If you don't, I'll scream, and while I'm screaming I'll rip your balls off with my bare hands, you ugly, dirty little kike." Mitch Newman went berserk. His face suddenly transformed into that of a snarling werewolf, and he hurled himself on her. Kelly was young, she was strong, she was an athlete, and she was brave. She should have had a chance. She didn't. Newman's rage was incandescent, and his hairy, small, musky body was as strong and as crushing as that of an ape. He got her down on the floor, sitting on top of her, and grabbed a pair of scissors off the desk. "Save your face, Kelly," he cackled. "Save your face, little Nazi bitch, yellow-haired Nazi bitch. Save your pretty blue eyes. Save your face and give it up to Yehudi, little Nazi shiksa bitch." The obvious insanity in his raving gibberish terrified the girl more than any mere physical assault could have done. Given some time to prepare, any kind of a break, she might have pulled herself together and made a quick plan, but the sheer suddenness, and it completely shattered her. "All right," she sobbed hysterically. "All right, just please don't hurt my face, please don't hurt my eyes." From then on, there was only horror. After their usual tortuous journey in the Nissan, doubling up and down the streets and making sure they weren't being followed, Cody and Nightshade arrived at the safe house which a company was using that week. This one was a sumptuous Tudor mansion in Medina leased to a fictitious third party by an NVA op in a real estate management company. Cody and Emily immediately asked to see Bobby Bells, and between them made out a clear and forceful case for termination of Mitch Newman. The material they had printed off from Newman's computer was convincing, especially when they were able to log back into Newman's hate crime hotline from a laptop using the information they had gained from Dr. Doom's hacking programs, and showed to Bella personally what they were talking about. "What's the story on this Kelly Shipman girl?" asked Bells, reading over the file that Cody had printed out. In here, Newman's got her allegedly telling him nigger jokes, making pro-comments on NVA tickles that she saw in the media, including that one where we had our little contretemps with Nightshade here, and saying that white people need a country of their own. Number one, why hasn't he turned her in? Number two, why haven't we approached her? "I don't think those entries in that file are accurate, sir," said Cody crisply. "I know Kelly Shipman personally, and she hasn't made any racial statements in my hearing. So far as I can tell, she's non-political in her thinking and completely focused on her acting career. She thinks the NVA are terrorists, pretty much believes what she sees on TV, etc. She calls us Spuckies, which should tell you where she's coming from." "High's resident movie star," said Emily. "She acted in some tea and a cheerleader movie down in Hollywood last spring news, and so now she's queen bee around school, or was until she graduated. Cody's mashed on her." Cody ignored her. "This man has a history of sexual harassment against white girl students, Bobby, and if rumor is true, a few Asian girls as well. It seems a solid bet that he uses threats of denunciation through the government's hate crime hotline program to force his targeted victims to submit, whether he's a racial Jew or not. And I think the Hebrew passwords are dead giveaways. He's been turning people in to the feds. The fact that he's been informing on the wrong people, and apparently doing it for personal gain rather than loyalty to Zog, doesn't matter. He's still an informer, and that put him in our sights. It's pretty well known around school that the hate crime hotline is a witch hunt, and that once you're accused of racism, there's no defense and no escape without all kind of lawyers, money, denazification, public humiliation, and a permanently blighted future. I'm not surprised that they give in. These comments of hers may be complete fabrications, or they may be distortions of casual remarks Kelly may have made in an unguarded moment over the past year or so. She graduated from Hillside this year like me, and she's in our drama class, but in September she's going to college down in Los Angeles, so this will be Newman's last chance to have at her. My guess is that sometime soon he's going to threaten her with that file he's building, which at the very least can ruin her career and any chance she ever has of being an actress, and demand that she give him sex in exchange for his silence as to her alleged racial and political indiscretions. Comrade Nightshade's flippant tone notwithstanding, I do know her. She's a good person even though she's not racial, and she doesn't deserve to have something like that happen to her. I'd like to move on this before it does." Bells nodded. "All right, you've got my okay. Your Mr. Newman just made the hit parade. Tell you what, I'll let you guys set it up. Be good experience for both of you. But do not just go out and plug this Hebe on your own like cowboys. Even a little pissin' job like this guy can go bad wrong real quick. You keep me in the loop, and before you move I want to go over your whole plan step by step. If I think you need backup or a driver, I'll assign someone. But you're gonna have to hold off for the moment. For one thing, you guys are still supposed to be checking out the goings-on at that Holy Roller Tabernacle and bird-dogging that army captain and that sleazy preacher, finding out what they're up to. I don't want you doing anything that might send you on the bounce and screw that up. Brigade and 3rd Section both want that at the top of your list. But beyond even that, right now there's other fish to fry. Something's coming down, and soon. It may impact on our whole scene here. Priority or not, you may have to skip church tonight and call in sick tomorrow if we still need you here. Nothing going on until choir practice tomorrow. "What's up, Lieutenant?" asked Cody. "I ain't sure myself," said Bells. "I don't know if you two heard a news broadcast today, or whether you were too busy down there dancing around like ducks for this rat bastard Kaike when you weren't hacking his computer, but President Clinton's coming on TV in a little while, and she's going to make some big announcement about the Northwest." "We've won," said Cody immediately. "Yes, sir. I got a course on that weapon from my 3rd Section control. Name around me. We'll give you a 16. Remind me when we've got the time, and me or Eddie will go over the 74 with you. We'll most likely end up using the Kalashnikov as our basic infantry weapon, since they're not only damned fine guns, they're as cheap and plentiful as lollipops thanks to our new friend in the Kremlin, Premier Komarovsky." "Yes, sir. For another thing, there's been some changes at the top in our command roster," continued Bells. "We're getting a visit here later on tonight from the brigade commandant, that is the new one, Joe Dortmunder, whom you've met. The old commandant, Frank Barrow, is coming along as well, only he's some kind of general now. Oh, and I'm a captain, by the way. Apparently we're going to be bringing some new guys into the brigade and expanding our companies. Besides that, once the officers get here, we got something for you two to do while we wait around for Chelsea to come on the tube." "Farmer said something about modeling?" asked Cody curiously. "Yeah," said Bells. "You two get to try on your new NVA uniforms. Apparently we're all gonna get 'em, although not for a while, but we get a sneak peek tonight. Including the latest summer ensemble for the well-dressed female volunteers, so we finally get to see Comrade Nightshade wearing a dress." "She wears a dress to church," said Cody. "The experience is overrated, I assure you." "Ow!" he yelped as Emily karate chopped him in the gut. When they were in the garage later on, Cody to receive his AK-74 and Nightshader M16, along with magazines and cleaning. "Kits and the web belt," he asked her. "You want to be the one to do the job on Newman when the time comes? He'd be a great target to make your bones on." "Nah, you can do it," she said carelessly. "I'll be the honey trap and he should go for it since he already tried once with me and struck out. Don't worry, Cody. I'm quite capable of killing someone personally. Especially a Jew who has made it clear that he views me as nothing more than a piece of meat he can handle at will. But I think it will do you more moral good, plus it will give you notch number 2 and add to your rep with the guys around here. Plus mine for being a slinky femme fatale, and I do mean fatale." "What do you mean, do me more moral good?" asked Cody in puzzlement. "Oh, call it better karma, a word which would make Pastor Len scream in horror if he heard me use it. Your reason for killing the son of a bitch is better." "Huh?" asked Cody stiffly. "I don't know what you mean." "Newman is a Jew, and no one needs a reason for killing a Jew. They're like rats or pigeons. They spread disease. It's a social hygiene thing. Newman has to go because he is an enemy of my race and my nation, and because he is a sexual predator who victimizes and humiliates my racial sisters." "Sure, we can take all that as read, and it's true enough as far as it goes," said Nightshade. "But you darn well know we've both got personal reasons. This isn't the mafia, you know, even if Captain DeBella is Italian. It doesn't have to be just business. We're allowed to get personal. I want that Jew dead just to avenge a personal insult. You want him dead to protect someone you love." She turned and pointedly walked out of the garage and back to the house, her rifle slung over shoulder, before Cody could say anything, which on quick reflection he decided was a good idea. Kelly was something he saw no point in discussing, with Emily or anyone else. Yet he wondered if he were really that obvious. If Emily could see it, surely Kelly herself at least guessed. A group of senior NVA officers duly showed up at the safe house later that evening, including not only the newly made General Barrow and Joe Dortmunder, but Red Morehouse and all their attendant bodyguards. They arrived with several suitcases from which they drew items of apparel. "Volunteer Brock, there's something I need to discuss with you," Barrow told him. "But we'll wait until after the president has made her speech. Depending on what she has to say, there may not be any need for your special services, even at this late date." Before Cody could ask what special services he could possibly provide, Morehouse spoke up. "In the meantime, we would like you and Comrade Nightshade to be the first to model these beings as your typical young volunteers of the kind we like to think of as our standard, so we can get an idea of what they look like. And also, General Barrow gets to try on his officer's kit, which he will soon be wearing on a formal occasion." "Ah, what occasion is that, sir?" asked Cody. Just to make sure, ask me again in—" Morehouse looked at his watch. "Half an hour. Those doo-doo birds in D.C. may turn out to have been playing us all along. I'll believe it when I hear it. Actually, let's not even mess around with the fashion show just yet. It's almost time. Captain DeBella, I assume that in an upscale dwelling like this you have a television with cable news?" 50-inch plasma satellite rig, sir, down in the rec room." "Gather everyone in, except one sentry," commanded Barrow. "We have a bit of history in the making here, and I want everybody to see it." Cody was glad neither he nor Nightshade was chosen for guard duty. DeBella turned on the tube and flipped the remote a bit. There were the usual shopping channels, Gilligan's Island reruns, old movies, and assorted politically correct programs of various kinds, but every news channel and all the networks were carrying coverage of an imminent presidential address to the nation. Bells settled on CNN. The first thing they saw was the ebony face of Paulus Ingram, a well-known network talking head. "We're still waiting for the hookup from the Oval Office to begin," said the toothsome Negro with the $300 conch coiffure to straighten his kinky hair. It appeared he was addressing a white female talking head, an equally well-coiffed blonde whose face appeared in the lower right hand of the television screen. The White House was behind her, illuminated in the muggy darkness of a summer night. "Apropos of what you were saying just a minute ago, Jenny, the president's announcement is definitely unexpected. We didn't get word ourselves until this morning. CNN has been informed that she and the vice president, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the director of Homeland Security met with a delegation of senior legislators from both houses of Congress this afternoon, and apparently what they had to say took these congressional VIPs by complete surprise. I have heard described to me that their faces leaving the White House were in some cases angry and in some cases simply baffled. It's also unexpected in that this is Chelsea Clinton's first separate nationwide address devoted entirely to the subject of domestic terrorism, outside of what might be considered the standard and obligatory references and expressions of our national determination to, with the war on domestic terror during her State of the Union addresses. Miss Clinton has in fact devoted most of her term to the social agenda, which has always been her family's strongest point when the Clintons have been in office, as opposed to the Bushes, who are generally more prominent in foreign affairs and security issues, although it has to be said that the current President Clinton has continued the last President Bush's strong line in the war on terror to the satisfaction of both parties. She's taken a firm stand on both Islamic terrorism in the Middle East and throughout the world, and she's been just as firm on racist terror in the Pacific Northwest. But this president has so far been content to leave security issues to the professionals, and in order to further professionalize the struggle against domestic terrorism, at the beginning of her term she signed off on the creation of the Federal Anti-Terrorist Police Organization without hesitation. A notable bipartisan effort which won her a lot of points on both sides of the aisle. "Yes, indeed, Paulus," said Jenny brightly. "That was to be expected in view of the fact that the FATPO bill received bipartisan backing, notably from her mother, former President Hillary Clinton, in return for the Republicans' concession regarding the suspension of the 24th Amendment, which would allow Hillary herself, one more shot at the gold ring, and enable her to succeed her own daughter for an unprecedented third term. That would be one for the books, Paulus. But Washington is a goldfish bowl. Surely we must by now have at least some inkling of what the president intends to say? Ingram replied, "Well, Jenny, there is some speculation that she finally intends to declare at least 3 Pacific Northwest states and parts of several others to be in a state of insurrection against the United States, which is a step that congressional conservatives and liberals alike have been calling on her to perform for many years, and if I may say so, if this is the reason for the president's address tonight, then it's not before time, Jenny. I simply don't know what else that the level of terrorism and racist intimidation which exists in Washington and Oregon and Idaho could possibly be called, if not an armed insurrection. The official reason that this hasn't been done is that to do so would concede that the United States has in effect lost control over the Pacific Northwest, and thus hand the terrorists a moral victory, but a lot of people have never really bought that." Morehouse shook his head and sighed. "They've already suspended virtually every constitutional guarantee that our forefathers had, habeas corpus, the Bill of Rights. They set up the FISA court for secret wiretaps as early as 1978, for crying out loud. Why should they bother to declare a legal status which existed de facto even before 1022? The federal government has been doing whatever the hell it wants to do to white people for years." Babbling on. "I asked about that very issue earlier tonight when I had NAACP President Jamal Watkins on my show. Seem to have a little time. Can we roll that one clip while we wait for the president to make her appearance?" The screen flashed to another negroid countenance. He was seated in a plush studio swivel chair. "I would very much hope that tonight President Clinton shall indeed finally take the necessary steps to address the problem of racist terror in our society. The people of this country have long awaited some sign that those in power are ready to make a commitment to human decency and crush, exterminate, and cut off from the earth these white racist moiterers who have defiled." Ingram broke in. "Wait, I have been informed that President Clinton has entered the Oval Office." The scene suddenly cut to the sad camel face of Chelsea Clinton, wearing a prim tweed suit and seated behind a large mahogany desk in the Oval Office, American and Israeli flags behind her. "I doubt that's actually the Oval Office," said Morehouse. "Third Section Intelligence tells us she's afraid to stay in the White House anymore, since we keep shelling it as part of Operation Pigkill. That's probably some mock-up, and she's really broadcasting from Camp David or someplace." "Does every American president since Jug Ears do these things with an Israeli flag in the background?" complained Bells. "It's their way of letting us know who really has the power," chuckled Barrow. "You know, like opening a fortune cookie and finding a message that says, 'Help, I am being held prisoner in a fortune cookie factory.'" "Seriously?" replied Morehouse. "Back during Jug Ears' second term, the Pals let off a really big banger in Jerusalem and splattered a couple of hundred Hebes all over the landscape, so Bush, too, started displaying the Israeli flag along with the red, white, and blue at White House functions, our brave little partner in the battle against evil global terrorism and all that. Crap, never mind the fact that none of the whole mess would have happened if it hadn't been for that insane idea of planting a few million Jews in the middle of hundreds of millions of people who loathe them, and then giving the same Jews a blank check to go berserk and slaughter Muslims right, left, and center. The so-called War on Terror didn't begin on September 11, 2001. It began in 1948. Anyway, the tradition of the Israeli flag at all presidential dog and pony shows just kind of stuck. Hell, give them an A for honesty. Chelsea was still staring silently at the camera like a dead fish. Apparently no one had told her to start speaking yet. "Does she have the little box on her back this time, with the earphone so whoever her handler is off camera can tell her what to say?" asked Dortmunder. "I saw that one campaign speech back during the election, where it actually came loose and fell out from under her jacket onto the floor. And you know, it didn't even raise any eyebrows. No one ever believed she spoke for herself anyway. They might as well morph her face into Hillary's." "Every time I look at her I feel great," said Emily with a grin. "Because when I see Chelsea, I know there's one other than I am." Something prompted Cody to lean over and whisper in her ear, softly but firmly, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, comrade. You are not ugly to me, or to any man here, He felt her jump, but his eyes were on the TV screen as President Chelsea Clinton began to speak. "Good evening," she said. "Tonight I wish to speak to the United States of America and to the world about something which I understand and accept will be very much misunderstood, and which will cause deep feeling throughout the country. But what I must discuss with you tonight is an idea whose time has come, and it may well prove to be the beginning of a new era in this nation's long war on terrorism. For many years during the last century, terrorism was something that was restricted to foreign countries, mostly in the Middle East as the result of Muslim refusal to accept the sudden existence of a Jewish state in their midst where none had been before, and the Muslim world's subsequent abandonment of all civilized and humane standards of behavior in their effort to drive that Jewish state out of existence. As both the foremost ally of Israel and the standard-bearer of democracy and enlightenment, it was perhaps inevitable that the United States would be eventually dragged into that terrorist conflict. Then came the cataclysmic events of September 11, 2001. Ever since then, the United States has followed a policy of bringing democracy and freedom directly to the Muslim world, by persuasion and diplomacy where possible, by compulsory regime change where necessary. It is in the interest of all of humanity that Islam be required to embrace values and systems of government which will enable the State of Israel to survive and prosper, and thereby bring about the ultimate goal of all world history, a brotherhood of man. This administration, like previous ones, has continued this benevolent policy of imposing civilized thoughts and behaviors on those within the Islamic world who are unwilling to recognize the need to modernize their faith and bring it into conformity with 21st century human values, specifically rendering Islam inclusive of women, religious and racial minorities, and those of different sexual orientations. We will not falter in this sacred trust. Israel is intended by God to be a light unto the nations, and America was created to be the torchbearer of that light. "I thought it had something to do with a tax on tea," growled Bells. "She's laying it on thick," said somebody behind Cody and Emily, who were sitting on the couch. "Somebody really glued butt tonight." "But closer to home, tragic events have taken shape," Chelsea went on. "Our own country, throughout its long history, has never been free of the curse of racism, of intolerance, of hatred and bigotry, of contempt for minorities, and women and gays on the part of the heterosexual and patriarchal white males who controlled America and its resources for so long, a part of our national existence. Within the past 3 generations, to our eternal credit, America has begun to step forward, out of the fever swamp of racial hatred, and into the green and pleasant meadows of brotherhood and tolerance, beginning with the civil rights movement, led by the immortal Dr. Martin Luther King, and continuing on with the anti-Vietnam War movement of the 1960s, in which my own beloved parents grew to political and personal maturity. "Damn it, woman, will you just get on with it?" groaned Bobby. No, all this waffle may be a good thing," said Morehouse, watching intensely. "She may be wrapping a bitter pill for them to swallow in layers of verbal cotton candy. Or her speechwriter is—" It was inevitable that there would be bitter and stubborn resistance to the march of the New World Order, said Chelsea, changing tone. Sometimes violent and criminal resistance by men with closed minds and closed hearts. For many years, hate crime was dealt with swiftly and efficiently by law enforcement and the courts, and many white males paid the price for their refusal to turn their back on the past and accept the coming of a bright new day of tolerance and diversity where the black man, the brown man, and women and gays of all colors walked proudly at his side as his equals, and, more often than not, his betters. Up until a certain day in October, 4 years and 9 months ago, we thought that ordinary criminal procedures were enough to deal with this cancer of racism and hatred in our society. Unfortunately, we were wrong. On that October 22nd, evil men who had spent years creating and perfecting a diabolical criminal conspiracy elected to use a child custody case involving the Singer family of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, as an excuse to launch what can only be termed an insurrection against the United States. "Oh shit," said Barrow with a sigh. "Somebody's gotten to her. She's backing out of it at the last minute. It's martial law." Emily leaned over to Cody on the couch and whispered softly, "Thank you, comrade." Chelsea continued to drone in a monotone. That insurrection has gone on for almost 5 years now. It has claimed thousands of lives. This very hallowed and historic home of the nation's chief executive, from which I address you tonight, has been attacked and damaged, and my own life and the lives of my family have been threatened. Some of my closest political and personal friends and allies have been murdered. The terrorist campaign has destroyed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of both government and private property, and not only in the Northwest. That destruction, combined with the lost revenue and the expense required to enforce the law and maintain security in the Pacific Northwest, and now in other parts of the country, is now literally beyond calculation, as I have been informed by the General Accounting Office. "Bingo!" yelled Red Morehouse triumphantly. "The accountants have finally hoisted the white flag, and the generals in to follow. Worst of all, the ongoing racial violence in the Pacific Northwest has distracted this great nation of ours both from America's civilizing mission in the Muslim world and from our domestic agenda of creating a true and inclusive paradise on earth, insofar as that is humanly possible, based on the ancient Jewish and yet also universal idea of a brotherhood of man. Assessing the developments in the Pacific Northwest over a lengthy period of time, I have come to the conclusion that if there is any chance of an immediate cessation of the violence and loss before the end of my term as president, then I have to investigate and assess it, regardless of my personal feelings in the matter and the deep-seated repugnance I feel in giving a vicarious legitimacy to terrorists, bombers, and murderers. But there are times when a leader's duty to her country and to human civilization itself demand that she make difficult and controversial choices. I have never feared controversy. I know that my decision in this matter will cause alarm, despondency, and suspicion in many quarters. I will tell you all tonight that these fears are misplaced. When you elected me as your president, you have given me a sacred trust, and I will never betray that trust. In this crucial time in our country's history, I must ask for your faith in my intentions, your support in this vitally necessary development, and your prayers. I do not like doing this one bit, but if I can end the horrific violence which has poisoned our national life for so long, and which threatens to undermine and destroy everything which makes America great, then it is my duty to make the attempt. I can do no more or less. Accordingly, I have today signed and issued 2 executive orders. In my capacity as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, effective immediately, I hereby direct all American military units and law enforcement agencies in the Pacific Northwest to halt operations and observe a full ceasefire. I have received a reciprocal commitment to a full ceasefire from the... Chelsea suddenly stopped and pursed her lips, almost like she was trying to repress a cough or sneeze. "Bet she's being prompted from that box thingy," said Dortmunder. "From this moment on," she concluded, almost spitting out the sentence. "She couldn't bring herself to say our name," said Barrow in disgust. "That was better than a 21-gun salute," said Morehouse gleefully. "That's it, guys. We have just been recognized." Chelsea hurried on, apparently anxious to get it over with. "Secondly, I am ordering that beginning on August the 1st of this year, a conference shall be convened at Longview, Washington, between representatives of the United States government and the Northwest Volunteer Army in order to bring about a negotiated settlement which shall permanently bring this conflict and its murderous violence to an end. My fellow Americans, thank you all, and good night." The screen went momentarily blank, and then returned to the news studio and the stunned, negroid face of Paulus Ingram. His bubble-lipped jaw was down to his chest. "Muthafuka," he suddenly screamed. "Dot honky bitch done sold our black asses out. She gon' surrender to those racist NVA Muthafukas." Red Morehouse reached for the remote and hit the mute button. "Well, it took her a while, but she said it," said Red Morehouse into the silent room. "We beat the bastards," said Bells in wonder, almost to himself. "We beat the bastards." "So why don't I feel jubilant?" asked Cody in a daze. "Because we haven't won yet, Volunteer Brock," said Red Morehouse. "Tonight is arguably the most crucial point in the entire revolution. We may still lose it all. That's why I hit the mute on the TV. One of us will have to stay here and monitor the coverage, because I need to know what's going on. It's going to be pandemonium. And I know we'd all like to spend all night watching all those smart-ass media niggers and Jews and liberals going raving mad on the air. But what you just heard, comrades, is the starting gun on a race that we can still lose. And to quote a line from the Three Musketeers, now we must bustle. Okay, define bustling in this context, please, sir? Asked Cody. The NVA must prepare to launch 2 major offensives, one military and one propaganda. For the first time in 5 years, we are going to be coming out from underground, and we must begin to present an attractive yet forceful and authoritative face to the public. Plus, of course, the political offensive that you'll be involved in down in Longview, of course. That I will be involved in, sir? Asked Cody in astonishment. I need to talk to you later about that, Brock, said Barrow. We want you to come with the NVA Peace Conference delegation. Cody's jaw was down to his knees, but before he could say anything more, Barrow went on. That was one reason we brought these uniforms tonight. To see how you look in one. We need to make sure it fits, and make any necessary alterations before you step out in front of those television cameras at Longview. Cody stared at Emily, who leaned over and whispered, If there's a ceasefire, that means they'll want us to hold off on clipping Mitch Newman. I'm still going to kill him, ceasefire or no ceasefire, muttered Cody back, sotto voce. Volunteer Brock, could you please step into one of these other rooms and change into these threads? Asked Dortmunder, handing Cody a stack of clothing and a pair of spit-shined paratrooper boots. Those won't be your actual boots unless you like the fit. These are 11 wides. What's your shoe size? 10 regular, sir, said Cody. Okay, we'll get you another pair, but you can get into these tonight. Comrade Nightshade, I've laid yours out on the suitcase over there. Emily gathered up the clothes and said, I'll use the bathroom, and went in to change. And now Frank gets to try on his brand new General's togs, said Morehouse sweetly, handing Barrow a suitcase. Let me guess, said Barrow. It's based on the uniform of a Napoleonic hussar, and I will carry a saber and wear a big bearskin shako. Or perhaps a German pickelhaube. Why the hell do we need uniforms at all? Why not just a suit and tie? Some will be in suits and ties, yes, said Morehouse. But you and some of the NVA delegation need to wear these because you're soldiers negotiating an end to a war, not Rotarians going to church or a business meeting. This isn't just costumery like in the old days, Frank. This isn't a few pathetic Ku Klux Klansmen shuffling down the street in historically inaccurate bilious green robes or a few sad sacks in homemade costumes pretending to be 1930s SA men. You will be wearing the military uniform of a country. Our country. It's a vitally important part of the image that we want to project during this conference, and this being 21st century America, in this media-driven society image, may turn out to be more important than anything else we do. We have finally succeeded in breaking the United States' credible monopoly of armed force. We kill people and we get away with it, and now it's time for us to strut that stuff. You represent the gun barrel of power, the real power of life and death, and we want you to look powerful. Clothes do make the man, to some extent. But by the by, we will also provide several conservative business suits and one set of formal wear for each man and woman in the delegation. It will be one of your judgment calls to figure out when it's appropriate to wear what. Roebuck, replied Morehouse. Technically, they're called engineer's boots. They're just for officers, enlisted men, and standard black paratrooper boots. What's the number 33 for, sir? Asked Cody Brock, who had also emerged from a nearby room wearing the enlisted man's version. In his case, he wore the paratrooper boots, OD green trousers, and a heavy khaki shirt, and instead of the billed cap he wore a green wool alpine ski cap with a chin strap and a sharp creased peak, also bearing the green, white, and blue Northwest rondel. He also had a 33 on his collar. And what does NDF mean? 33 is technically the unit to which both you and General Barrow are now assigned. What was formerly the No. 3 Seattle Brigade is now the 3rd Regiment of the 3rd Division, Morehouse explained. NDF stands for Northwest Defense Force, which is what the Northwest Volunteer Army will be renamed as soon as we think the time is right to make the jump. We are transforming ourselves from an underground movement based on a cell structure into an open militia, which will eventually become the full-fledged regular army of a sovereign state. Instead of brigades and companies and assault teams or crews, we now have regiments. Brigades and sometimes companies have been given regimental numbers as part of the new org table, which is about as far as it's gotten so far. Eventually, each newly designated regiment will number 3 battalions of approximately 500 men each. Several regiments will be brigaded together into corps. A division will number about 20,000 men, so forth and so on. Don't worry about all that stuff for now. Dortmunder knocked on the bathroom door. Comrade, you ready? Out stepped Emily Pastras. And modeling the female version of the Northwest's new summer look, we have the fetching Miss Nightshade, he announced with a flourish. Emily's uniform consisted of the same khaki shirt with crossbelt and tabs, with silver lieutenant's bars instead of a general's stars, but instead of the billed cap there was a green beret with the rondel, a dark green skirt coming to just below the knee, and sensible flat shoes. For the sidearm she had an open clip holster with a snub-nose revolver. "Do I have to wear this tie?" she demanded. "Women look ridiculous wearing men's ties." "Now you know what we've felt like when we worked in offices over the past 100 years, said Morehouse with a smile. "Can't I have an open collar, or failing that some kind of scarf or cravat?" she demanded. I'll ask around and see what we can come up with by way of a neckerchief, but we want you ladies looking like soldiers, not girl guides," said Morehouse. "Hey, how did she get to be a lieutenant?" demanded Cody in outrage, pointing at the insignia on Emily's epaulettes. "You're a lieutenant as well, we just didn't get around to telling you yet, and right now we're kind of short on uniforms," Morehouse assured him. "Virtually every volunteer now in the NVA will have the opportunity to become an officer, and with your nice new shirt and your little silver bars, you'll get a company. Of raw recruits, you're going to have to turn into soldiers, which is going to be interesting since a lot of our people have no experience whatsoever in the actual military. Plus the fact that we've got some elements in the NVA who are near as damn it to being outright gangsters. Speaking of which, what does the Army Council plan on doing about O.C. Ogilvy and those wild men in North Idaho?" asked DeBella. "I'll tell you flat out, I don't think they're going to obey any order to lay down their arms. They're having too much fun." "I don't know," admitted Morehouse frankly. "Don't worry about it for the time being. I agree it's a problem, but we're still going to need those wild men, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. I look like some kind of World War I officer who's about to blow my whistle and order the lads over the top at dawn," complained Barrow, who had been studying himself in a full-length mirror in the hall. "I'm surprised they didn't give me a damn swagger stick." Maybe, but I'd say Comrade Brock here looks more like an old SA man from the days of the beer hall fighting in Weimar, Germany," said Dortmunder, looking him over critically. "Much more nifty and historically apropos image, I'd say." Morehouse agreed. "We lucked out on the ski caps. We found a surplus warehouse in Tacoma with thousands of them. We had to pretty much stick with what we could get for the uniforms, but there were those who wanted the NDF to look like everything from spacemen to cowboys to Vikings with horned helmets." "Red, did the Army Council absolutely nix swastika armbands?" asked Barrow. "One would look awfully good on that left sleeve and appease the spirit of Commander Rockwell in his grave." "For the purpose of the negotiating teams and any public appearances, yes," replied Morehouse, "at least for now. Remember, this is as much a propaganda exercise as it is diplomatic. We don't want to really send the Jews into orbit, plus it's a bit of a touchy subject. We're already starting to get a few mutters from some of our more conservative comrades about how this is supposed to be a white American revolution and not a Nazi beer hall putsch, etc. I know it's appalling that after 5 years of fighting side by side with us, some of our comrades still have these archaic and completely meretricious ideas about National Socialism, especially since those same Nazis have probably saved their lives more than once. But unfortunately, we have to play the cards we're dealt. I know it's frustrating that now National Socialism has proven itself once more to be a living force among men and capable of victory. We still have to cater to this ancient war propaganda and kowtow to this stupid, brainwashed hatred among the masses against the most ancient and honorable symbol of the Aryan race. But we're going for the big prize here, and we can't afford to let ourselves get distracted from the main thrust. I'll show you what we were able to get from them as a concession, though. Morehouse went to a closet and took out a garment on a coat hanger, encased in transparent plastic dry cleaner sheeting. He pulled up the plastic and displayed a heavy camouflage shirt bearing the same black collar tabs as Barrow's new uniform, a different camouflage from that used by the Federals. This camo was a darker green with traces of black and yellow, the fletches and swatched more narrow and largely parallel to the floor. This will be the fatigue uniform for the Northwest Defense Force. The camo pattern is called Tiger Stripe, and you see that in this, at least, the National Socialist heritage of our people has been honored. He pointed to an embroidered eagle and swastika emblem with extended wings which had been sewn into the fabric just over the buttoned-down right pocket, in the manner of the old uniforms of the Third Reich. These are for combat dress only, and you won't be wearing them at Longview, but I was able to persuade the Army Council that we needed the swastika on here at least, as a unifying symbol and rallying point for all the diverse elements, if you'll... the term, who will be comprising our new military. SS units will have the same gear except they'll have SS runes tab, instead of NDF. SS? Asked Cody. We have an SS now? Isn't that a bit, premature? Form follows function, replied Morehouse. We have the function, and now we're adding the form. We have reached the point where we need a few elite units to carry out special operations, and so the Army Council has authorized the creation of a special service. Carter Wingfield is ramrodding the first group right now. I might add that his boys wore this uniform that you guys are modeling tonight for the first time when they picked up a batch of newly released NVA prisoners in Miller Sylvania Park earlier this month. Hopefully this new SS formation will uphold the proud tradition of the heroes of old. How do I get into this SS? Asked Cody eagerly. Morehouse chuckled. Well, right now I'm not sure. The only individual officer I know besides Carter who's in it is Lieutenant Bill Vitale. They're hand-picking the heaviest hitters we've got for his team, and with all due respect, Cody, I don't think you're quite in that category yet. But don't worry. I suspect we will have more than enough rough and tumble coming for you to prove your mettle, if that's what you decide you want. As much as I hate to say it, one way or the other our new country is probably going to be almost a military dictatorship for the first few years of our existence. Don't worry, you'll be right at ground zero for history in the making, at Longview. Yes, sir, I meant to ask that. Why exactly do you want me to come with you to Longview? Joe has explained your personal situation to me, Volunteer Brock, said Barrow. He tells me you speak Yiddish. Is that true? Regrettably, sir, I do, said Cody with a sigh. I was not only taught the language in a classroom for 3 years, but my takes a village family had Yiddish tages where we spoke nothing else among ourselves or around the house, as well as Hebrew days. Hebrew always looks to me like a cockroach fell into a pot of ink, and he staggered across a sheet of paper trying to escape. Can you actually read those squiggles? Asked Barrow. Yes, sir, Cody told him. Well then, it should be obvious why we need you there, said Red Morehouse. We have information that some of the American negotiation team will think it's cute to natter among themselves in Jew-speak, and they may be so confident that none of us can understand them, that they slip up and say things that will be of interest to the delegation of the Republic. We want you to go to Longview with us as an aide-de-camp or something of the kind. You will stick close to General Barrow, carry his briefcase, light his cigar, keep your mouth shut, and your ears open. Got it, sir, said Cody happily. What about this ceasefire, sir? Asked Bobby Bells. How exactly does that work? We just sit on our asses while they bullshit with each other down in Longview? Hardly, said Morehouse with a thin smile. What do you think that special service unit is being set up for? While General Barrow and his team are down in Longview finalizing our independence, the rest of us will be out and about the homeland grabbing everything that isn't nailed down. But we have to keep the gunplay to an absolute minimum. We're going to stage a coup, but it has to be bloodless. All strangling? Asked Bells. I like the way you think, Captain DeBella, chuckled Morehouse. Someone seems to have neglected to explain the concept of a ceasefire to the enemy, sir, spoke up Morehouse's bodyguard Dexter from the doorway to the rec room. Dex held out a cell phone. Commandant Graham from No. 2 Seattle Brigade on the horn for you and for General Barrow, he said. Immediately after the president finished her speech, FATPO units all over the city left their barracks and started going berserk. Looks like they knew what was coming, and they were all gassed up and ready to go. They're setting fire to buildings, setting up roadblocks where they stop cars and beat the drivers, occupying malls and public places and shaking everybody down, roaring through residential neighborhoods and firing into people's homes. All kinds of crap like that. They've already killed some people. Morehouse grabbed the phone. "Yes, Jock?" he said. He listened for several minutes and then he said, quietly but firmly so everyone in the room could hear him, "I will stand for the Army Council tonight until they can get in touch and be apprised of the situation. Get your men out on the streets, Commandant, all of them, and hit FATPO troops wherever you find them. Chase those plague rats back into their holes and make sure they stay there until they leave for good under the terms of the settlement. As of the end of President Clinton's speech tonight, this is now our country. We will defend it, and we will let everyone see us defending it. America ended tonight. It's time we let the world know that the boss man is back, and we ain't putting up with any more shit from uppity niggers. Get out there and cut those bastards down."